I think I need to do this from now on, Seth. I think I need to jump in the bathroom, and this is a sweet backdrop.
That's a cool backdrop. It really is.
It's too heavy to like hang up with just tacks or something. I need like actual command strips, or I don't know. It's a very hefty blanket here. Welcome, my lords, to the Well-Earned Comforts podcast. I'm Sam.
And I'm Seth.
Thank you for joining us on the Walls of Isengard as we explore the many works of Tolkien and discuss life. We're glad to have you as part of the fellowship, as there's no telling where we swept off to. And today we are blessed by the honor and privilege to interview our guest Benjamin out there. And before we get to him, we're going to just kind of babble like Butterbur a little bit. Actually, we'll start with you, Benjamin. I'm going to throw you on the spot there. The listeners, all 10 of you, 12 of you, however many of you that are listening, already know Seth and I pretty well. We talk about pretty much the same things every single week. So I think a lot of people will skip through this part, so I'm going to start with you so they don't skip through this part, and just tell us, how you doing, what's up, a little bit about yourself, just a couple minutes here. Why are you into Tolkien?
Hi, my name's Ben. I've been into Tolkien for, I don't know, since I was 6 or 7. He was one of the very first books I ended up reading, The Fellowship. And I work as a teacher and a catechist, and I end up going back to Tolkien at least once a year, because there's something in there that either I just want to refresh myself with, or it's actually useful.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you say you're a teacher. Are you high school teacher, middle school, elementary? What age?
Middle school religious education.
Very cool.
Yeah,
how often do you slip Tolkien into your topics there?
With some of the older grades, actually, a couple of years ago, a couple of times a semester. But I've had earlier grades like 4th, and they're not ready for it.
Could be tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say Sam being a youth pastor tries to slip it in all the time, and I think some people have even been like, you probably should pick things a little more relevant to today's day and age, which is actually a topic we'll get into later about Tolkien being timeless. But it's fascinating that you're able to slip it in with some of the earlier grades. See, we were both homeschooled, so to me 4th grade means very little. Is that like 10, 11 years old, or how old is that?
Let's see now. 11.
Okay, see, that's pretty close. Yeah, I could see that being a bit early. However, did you say you were about 6 when you first got into Tolkien?
6 or 7, yeah.
7.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So
you read The Fellowship of the Ring at 7 years old?
That's when I started it, yeah.
That's amazing. I think I started with The Hobbit like maybe 9 or 10, but The Fellowship, I mean, that's a whole nother beast. Like genuinely, the writing style and obviously the size of the books too. It's just, that's a whole extra. Was that so? I mean, I'm not going to try to out your age here at all, but was that before the movies, after the movies? Like, what got you? What about 7-year-old Ben was like, I just need to read Tolkien?
Well, I'd read the Chronicles of Narnia, and my brother had already read Tolkien, and I wanted to catch up. So
there you
go. No, I actually didn't see the movies until 2005 or something. Like the first, I want to say the first 2 had actually been out for a while before I even saw any of them.
Wow, impressive. Okay.
Yeah, didn't they come out
so you had your own
2000, 2001, 2003? Wasn't it like right at the turn of the century, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think 2002 was The Fellowship, but
was it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think so.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, I want to save some of your Tolkien story, because I'm really curious how you, aside from just your brother introducing you, like how he got into it at 10 if you were 7 and he's 3 years older. I want to dive into that, but let's maybe do our Riddles in the Dark segment first here, Sam. And Ben, I know we've done this on our spaces before, but we're just going to kind of think of a character, and then you get a minute to try to guess yes or no questions to see if you can narrow it down and guess the question. Last week, Sam didn't even know that he had picked a man when he thought he had picked an elf, and so that sent the whole game off on the wrong foot.
I gave you an opportunity to try again. You said no. All right, so
see, I
tried to right my wrong.
I'd rather say no and then rub it in your face for eternity. Fair
enough. Wow, that's crazy.
So let's see. How do we want to do this? Benjamin, why don't you think of a character for Sam, and then I'll think of one for you, and then Sam, we'll try it again. Deal?
Actually, I have a really good one. I know what race they are. I know their name. I know what age I know everything about this person. So
great.
I am prepared.
All right. Well, in that case, Benjamin, would you like to guess first or give yes or no answers first?
Oh, I think I'll guess first.
Ooh, okay. Putting me on the spot to come up with a character really quick. And this can be any character, so you can be pretty obscure with it if you like. All right, I've got my character. So I've got the clock here. I will let you know when it's a minute, and we'll call it at that point, but just yes or no questions. Are you ready, sir?
Sir.
All right, starting in 3, 2, 1, go.
Is this character immortal?
Yes.
Is this character male?
Yes.
Is this character in the Third Age?
No.
Is this character in the First Age?
Yes.
Is this character only in the First Age?
Yes.
Does this character die in battle?
No.
That's a good question. Oh.
Ooh. Shoot.
I had to think about that for a second.
Is this character affiliated with ships?
No.
Good. I see what you're doing
there. Is this character allied with elves?
Yes. And I'll give you another 15 seconds.
Does this character's progeny marry an elf?
No. And time.
Is it Tour?
What three? No, Sam, it's quiet.
Well,
it's not Tour. Right. No.
Okay.
We don't need the peanut gallery here. I'll give you. All right. What three guesses do you have?
I don't really have any.
Fair enough. It was actually Hurin.
He's affiliated with elves ish. Not really.
No, I said yes to that question.
Oh, I thought you said no.
Oh, you said no to that question.
All right.
Oh, well, if I did, my bad, because I definitely thought I said yes to that. See, now I'm the one eating my foot. All right, Benjamin, do you have a question for Sam? Do you have a character, or would you like a chance to think about it? You do. Okay. All right, Sam, your time. So I actually like the way that worked. We'll do a minute of yes or no questions, and then you get 3 guesses for the character. How's that? See, we're changing it on the fly. Yes, we're changing it on the fly. All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, is this character in the First Age?
Yes.
Is this character immortal?
No.
Is this character a man of Brethel?
No.
Okay. Is this character in the Baron and Luthien story?
No.
Is this character in the Fall of Gondolin story?
Yes. Well.
Okay.
No. Within like that story specifically, no.
Is this character in the Children of Hurin story?
Oh. No.
Okay. I'm
got about 5 seconds.
Is this character a male? I'll just go with that, I guess.
And time. All right. What 3 guesses do you have?
So not Children of Húrin, yes to Fall of Gondolin, and no to Baron Luthien. Was that correct? Is that what you said?
So the name would be dropped in both stories, but this character was not alive for either story.
Oh.
Huh. And it's a male from it's a mortal though. I guess. Oh, okay. All right, 3 guesses. I guess I'll just, even though I don't know if these are accurate at all.
Did you say is it a mortal or is it immortal?
I said a mortal, sorry.
Okay, so I thought you said, is he immortal? And this is an immortal character.
Oh, immortal character. Okay. Well, I'll get immortal. Okay, I'll guess. First stage. Feanor? No. Okay. Fingolfin.
Yep.
Okay. Manwë?
Nope.
Dang it. Okay, I give up. What is it? Ale. Okay.
Ale.
All right.
The Dark Elf.
That is a good one.
That's a tough one. Jeez.
That's a tough one. Nicely played.
Dang. Yeah, you had me there. I had no idea where I was going.
Which is hopefully a fascinating story too.
Seth here.
All right.
Yeah.
So then, Sam, do you have
Anglicale, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, Sam, are you ready?
Go ahead.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go. Is this character a man?
Yes.
Is this character in the first age?
Yes.
Is he only in the first age?
Yes.
Is he of the House of Hador?
No.
House of Baor?
No.
House of Haleth then?
He is it must be Hador then. Yeah. I don't think it's explicitly said, but it's probably Hador.
Okay. Is he friends with Baron? Or
No.
associated with... Okay, is he associated with Turin or Húrin?
Yes.
Which one? Turin?
I can't say.
Okay, I just said Turin, yes or no?
Oh, yeah, yes.
So it's a man associate. Oh, I think I have a pretty good idea. Is he... does he go around hoppa-footing?
No.
No. Okay, never mind. Shoot. I've got 15 seconds left. Is he part of the Outlaw Band?
No.
Is he part of Brethil?
No. Yes.
All right, that's my last guess. So, associated with Turin, part of Brethil. Is it Brandir?
No.
Is it Hunthor?
Yeah, there you go.
Got him. Does he die because a rock slips and hits him in the head and he falls tragically into a cavern?
First time I read that, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, what? The dude just, like, he sacrificed his life. Like, he's like, yeah, I'll go with you, Turin. Let's go do this. I'm the only one that's going to come with you. And then he gets hit by a rock and died. Just, I got to think,
funny,
like,
too, because
Tolkien must have just been laughing about that. Or that actually happened to, like, one of his buddies in battle. He was like, yeah, actually, just stray rocks, man. You got to watch out for him.
It's funny, too, because he's just barely in the book. The character gets introduced and you're like, oh, this seems like a really cool character. And 3 pages later, he's just gone.
Yep.
All right. Well, that was Riddles in the Dark. Sam, I don't know if you checked. Do we have any other tidings of the Fellowship? Tidings from the Fellowship?
I mentioned it pre-recording here, but Scott Marion reached out and shared that he listened to our last podcast. He really liked it, but he did inform me that there was, in fact, a dead space and where there was supposed to be Christopher Lee reading The Last Stand of Hurin, and so I went ahead and edited that, fixed it. So if you already listened to it before I did that, sorry, you can go back and listen to the epic rendition of Christopher Lee, who just does a fantastic job, audio version of that entire book, but especially that scene. So shout out to Scott Marion. He's a real IT guy. He had my back on that one. He even helped me because I was like, I'm struggling with this and that. And he just like, boom, I got you, man. Don't worry about it. And so huge fellowship member there. Luke Linville, our cousin, also texted both of us recently, mentioning he's been enjoying the podcast, gave us some tips and tricks on some audio stuff that, I mean, hopefully we'll fix, maybe post or something. Apparently my mic's been a little hot is what he said. But other than that, it's been I think it's been pretty quiet on the fellowship front there.
That's okay. No, we appreciate those couple of people reaching out, and Scott's always there to chime in. So thanks for listening, Scott. So let's get into kind of this interview a little bit. Not even really an interview, just a chat with Benjamin here. For some of you that are watching live on X, I don't know, 24 people have clicked in at some point. Who knows if they're still around, but I've hosted some Tolkien spaces in the past, and Benjamin's always dropping in and sharing some incredible insights and honestly very deep, thought-provoking things about Tolkien that I've never even considered. So that's why I wanted to bring him on today. Sam definitely agreed. So just to kind of break the ice and get us in the mood of Tolkien, that first Riddles in the Dark kind of helps. But I came up with 10 random rapid fire questions just to kind of get you guys to see where Benjamin's at with his lore and what he enjoys through Tolkien. And then we'll get into his Tolkien story and dive a little deeper into that. So Benjamin, you can give, 30-second answers to these questions, nothing too in depth, but just, kind of right off the old dome piece, if you will.
All right.
Just like old man Hunthor.
You didn't have to do him like that.
Poor guy.
All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite story or excerpt?
Ooh. Probably the story of the fall of Gondolin, but like more specifically Tuatha and Idril. Yeah.
That's a good story. That's one that actually I don't think we've covered yet on our podcast. So no, we should dive into that one at some point. It's really good. All right. Second question. What is your favorite book in the trilogy?
There is one right answer.
So I'd have to say, honestly, The Return of the King. And that has a lot to do with the fact that it's got the appendices in it.
Okay.
But it's a really... I do love The Fellowship, but Return of the King.
I always wonder on that one, because for me it's The Fellowship, but it didn't used to be. When I first started reading, it was definitely Return of the King, and then the more I multiple rereads and understanding the wider world that Tolkien created, The Fellowship ended up being my favorite. All right. Favorite realm. If you had to live in a realm in any of the ages, any of the lands, where would you live? What's your favorite realm?
It's a good question.
Probably a toss-up between Rivendell and Lindon.
Ooh, okay. Ooh. Out of curiosity, why Lindon? It's not Elven folk. Yeah, it's not described that much.
I have a huge amount of respect for Círdan, because he's just always there, and he's really consistent, and a lot of the other elves are kind of flaky, honestly. Yeah. But Lindon sort of sits at the crossroads of all three ages, and it would be sort of the last bastion outside of Rivendell of the sort of fused Noldor, Sindarin, Barolandic culture, which is my favorite tops.
Perfect. That's a great answer. I like that. All right. What is your favorite weapon?
Oof.
Say ground.
I love Sting, but it's got to be Andrew. Okay. I mean, you just can't beat that name.
Flame of the West. Yeah.
That's a good one for sure. All right. Best villain.
Ooh.
Does Meme count as a villain?
I think so.
Yeah, I'd say so.
He is a pretty petty dwarf after all.
Our Farazan gives a really good run for his money.
Ooh. It's a good answer.
I think probably Sauron.
Okay. See, I like the our Farazan shout.
Yeah.
He's just been so tainted by, as Sam likes to joke, the fat IT guy that Rings of Power portrays him as.
Yes, he has.
Not all IT guys, as Scott likes me to say.
Yeah, no,
he like that.
He's hitting the miles every day. It's impressive.
Yeah, he's on day 1,905.
Holy cow, that's impressive.
Running at streak. Yeah,
that's impressive. That's almost as old as you, I think, Sam.
Okay.
What is the most epic scene in the Legendarium in your mind?
Oof. That's a hard question.
That's almost unfair.
It is a hard question, yes.
I want to say from my gut, the fall of Ancalagon the Black.
Oh, okay.
It's got to be that, or Tolkien's putting Morgoth in chains, like one of those two.
Okay.
Okay.
I like both of those. Those are great. What is, just really quick, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned from Tolkien?
Hope is indispensable.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And then
even a fool's hope.
Even a fool's hope. All right, and then the last three are just kind of fun here. Who/what is Tom Bombadil?
We'll never know.
That's a good answer.
Come on!
That's a good answer.
Haven't you heard his name? It's Tom Bombadil.
He's the master. All right.
Or
do Balrogs have
himself into his artistry?
Do Balrogs have wings?
Let the reader decide.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. You're wanting to sit on the fence a little bit on the last couple here. That's all right. That's all right. All right. Last question, and I need a very serious answer. Is Rings of Power a quality TV show?
I'll tell you. I'll surprise you this way. Yes, it is. Not because of its artistry, not because of its dialogue, not because of its effects, but because if there was a perfect window into the current culture's capacity to write or not write, it would be Rings of Prime. That show is a masterclass in where we are in terms of, or rather, what's being funded in terms of artistic capacity.
Well said.
Wow. You know what? I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think you're spot on that one.
I made it all the way through season 2 because I simply couldn't believe that they would keep making it worse, and yet every single episode they somehow managed to make it worse. It was incredible.
It's really kind of blowing my mind that they've talked about, season 3 has started filming or whatever, and it's like, I honestly, when it's not out and being actively released, I don't even think about it unless I want to make fun of it. It just, you would think with our passion for Tolkien that it would be like, you're desiring, you can't wait, kind of like you've got a shipment on the way, you've got something in the mail you're waiting for, and it just, you can't wait for it to arrive. And with Rings of Prime, it's just like, I don't even think about it.
It's so alien from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird, like, knowing that they started filming right after, like, Christopher Tolkien died, and just knowing, like, okay, we're in the clear now. We're just going to do whatever the heck we want to do. And, I mean, not that I have a feeling that's how it went, but at the same time, it's like, just, to your point, yeah, like now that the last of whoever, not to use the word like gatekeeping, because that's kind of like a hot button word nowadays, but the last person who would really have the knowledge and the ability to say, no, that's not right, the respect to say that, he passes away, and they're like, okay, now we can get away with this. And then they get Tolkien professors to tell them that there is no canon and everything's up for grabs. Tolkien never said, so therefore go for it. And it's just ridiculous.
All right, well, let's go ahead, and thank you for all those. Those were good answers. I liked them a lot. Interesting about Lyndon. I'm still thinking about that and how it ties into all three ages. Círdan is probably the coolest elf, if not top 3. So I like that shout a lot. Let's dive into your Tolkien story, and I'll just kind of shut up for the first time during this podcast and just listen for a while. But you mentioned getting into it, getting into Tolkien, reading the Fellowship of the Ring about 7 years old. You're wanting to keep up with your older brother. I know Sam kind of has a similar story in that regard. But how did your brother get into it? When did you finally see the movies? Were they life-changing? Kind of what brought you to the point of wanting to actually study the lore and become well-versed in everything going on, things like that. So I'll kind of just hand it over to you and see what you have to say.
Well, we were also homeschooled, at least through 8th grade. And we grew up in a very literary household. Books everywhere, encouraged to just pull anything down from the shelf. But when we were moving, our parents were talking about getting rid of the Encyclopedia Britannica, Macro and Micropedia, and my brother like, don't you dare! I'll take one set, he'll take the other. Let's see now. I think my dad had read the Hobbit in college, and so like we had copies of the books because they were like, oh, the boys will like this someday, and they should probably read them. And like I said, I think we weren't recording it, but I'd read the Chronicles of Narnia, and Tolkien kind of just seemed like the most fitting progression on from that, and I fell in love with it more. And part of it was the style of writing. I really liked the way that Tolkien could actually write in an old style. Sort of mimic, especially, he does this much more in Return of the King, but sort of like mimic the kind of quasi-high medieval sort of style. And the story was just really attractive to me. It seemed to defend, we're a Catholic family. It really sort of just fit the home life and everything else that was around me. And I've always been a big rereader, so I'll go back and I'll reread sections of something. And once I got into the Silmarillion, which was probably about 9 or 10, I was just like, there's a whole world here. Why would I ever leave it? So I would go back and my brother and I at some point like transcribed copies of the Tengwar. He prefers the Cirith. But we'd be able to we picked the mode that was easiest to use and would transcribe or write out letters using just the Tengwar characters for an English substitution, not using the actual languages. But and there was always something more to uncover, especially since Christopher kept coming out with more editions. I remember when I just a couple of years ago I got my hands on Morgoth's Ring. And I was like, oh, there's a lot in here that is just really good. And then later I got into philosophy, and I started realizing that it's kind of a meme on Twitter, but the first myth that you're exposed to becomes, or first mythos that you're exposed to becomes really foundational. It's like, oh, yeah, that's true in this case, at least. Yeah. And he did, certainly the Legendarium sort of changed over time as Tolkien developed it. But I think he, at least in scope, got closer to an artistic vision like Dante's than pretty much anyone else has since. I don't know if he'll necessarily have the same staying power, but I think he's able to synthesize so much of what came before in a really organic and not preachy way, with a great story that it does operate off of some very definite principles, but like it's also very real, and deeply grounded, and that's just been something to go back to over and over again.
Yeah, that's one of those things that we were even thinking about talking about, just the timelessness of Tolkien and how it doesn't really matter when you read it. It's always applicable to something you're going through in your life currently. And I think that's exactly what you're describing, just the power of the way he wrote it, to where it was very organic and you don't really feel like it's being forced upon you, but you notice that it's there, and it's almost like something walking alongside you, even though it's not necessarily guiding you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like how you said, like, it's not preachy. Like, it's not a one-for-one allegory, or even, like, I mean, as you alluded to, like, Rings of Prime is preaching something, and it's very obvious what it's preaching. And that's the same for most, like, modern fantasy or, fiction stories that we come across. But obviously, being Catholic and Christian, like, there definitely is deep-rooted religious ties, Christian ties to his writings, but it's not a slap in the face. And that's very obvious by the diversity of the fellowship of Lord of the Rings, how people, all walks of life, can enjoy it as a story, but then as you dive deeper into it, you see the semblances, like you said, the idea that even, your biggest lesson that you brought up, like the idea that, hope is indispensable. Like, that is a core Christian value that we have, right? Like, that is faith. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, and the confidence of what we do not see. And so it's that ability to, like, look into the second layer of Tolkien's writings and see what he probably was feeling as he's writing it, just organically, as Seth mentioned. But also, again, you can just read it at a surface level, or you can, expose yourself to the works itself at a surface level and still be fascinated by the linguistics, the world building, the language, the characters, the relationships between those characters. Gimli and Legolas is a good example of just, what it looks like to be a friend to somebody who's vastly different than you. Just those easy lessons that you can learn from that. And something else I learned today, or this week, was apparently legendarium is a term that's only, like, focused, like, it's only, like, a Tolkien thing. Like, it's not I just assumed that was, like, a word for any kind of legendarium, but it's mainly talk, like, about Middle Earth and Tolkien's writings, which I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. He's got a whole word for himself in his writings. It's pretty sweet.
Interesting. I had no idea. Kind of Sam brought it back, but I'm curious, when you talked about the hope that Tolkien talks about and how that's the biggest lesson, dive into that a little bit. Why is that the biggest lesson to you?
Probably because it's the thing I've struggled with the most. I've had a long and troubled health history, so I've had to relearn this lesson over and over again. But I think part of the reason, in particular, Tolkien was able to drive this home, is because he has absolutely no qualms depicting a world which is, in many respects, very dark. It's brutal, and brutal things happen to it. But he makes, I think, a very actually sophisticated metaphysical case in the course of his narrative for how hope operates. And that, in a certain respect, hope is not necessarily about anything you can do per se. That's not to say that you don't have, like, responsibilities and obligations and tasks in front of you. Obviously, you do. But ultimately, and this is pretty explicit in the Lord of the Rings itself, but certainly throughout the rest of the Legendarium, like, the way it all turns out is not actually up to any of the men or elves in the Legendarium, and sometimes not even the powers of the world. He has this line that the Lord of the Rings especially is about God's divine sovereignty and his sole right to it. And it's a cold thought in some respects, but it is actually very, very assuring. It's just like, well, I can go so far and I'll break, and okay. That's okay. I just have to go to that point.
What you're describing to me sounds like kind of the difference between Estel and Amdir. Sam and I talked about this a little bit in our podcast with Finrod and Andreth, that debate, and how they get into a lot of what you're describing right now. But Estel is that hope. But it's more than a hope. It's a trust. And that's exactly what you're describing, where it's like you hope in the trust that what will be, and you don't necessarily have control over that. But the hope that you are trusting in is good in its essence, and it's something that you can lean your life on, versus Amdir, which is kind of the other type of hope that you're talking about with, like, we have our own agency, we have to take responsibility and things like that.
Yes. No, I think that's I think the debate of Finrod and Andreth is the most Christian, most overtly Christian incident in the entire Legendarium, and it's most explicitly philosophical. I think for that reason. But yes, that's. I mean, the entire mechanism of eucatastrophe is premised on that this is a real force. A sort of a causal force in the very fabric of reality. And it's because he so often operates at that level. And in both positive and negative ways. And Tarambar is a great example of what happens when you don't have Estel.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And he's not afraid to go there, because that's real, right? People end up falling into that. And that's really important to see. But yes, he draws it out so very well. I think that's one of the things that really grounds this sub-creation of his, why it's so applicable.
And that's another thing that is kind of like we've talked about already. It's not in your face. It really isn't, unless you kind of look for it or you pick up on it, where, I mean, all the characters, basically they're all throughout, I mean, first age, second age, third age, except for a brief time in like Numenor. I mean, there's always a losing battle that's being fought, and they're always holding on to the Estel, that deep rooted hope that you're describing. And that, I mean, it honestly, that's kind of, like you said, it's fundamentally Christian and, you know, Catholic to think that way, because that's where we're at in our world, where we're constantly fighting a losing battle. We're always fighting against entropy of things trying to, you know, bring chaos out of order, and we're trying to hold it together. And in the end, we just have to trust that we don't have control over everything in that sense. So question, you had mentioned when we were DMing a little bit about wanting to jump into kind of Tolkien and technology. And I've heard you describe this a little bit in some of the spaces that we've done together, but I'd love for you to just kind of give a summary of why that interests you and kind of your take on it, because I remember during the spaces, it kind of made me think of it in a way I hadn't before. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Well, there are a bunch of different ways we could go with it. One of the reasons that this interests me is because AI has become a thing. And so everyone's like, well, what would... I think Tolkien's approach to technology is actually very useful for sort of sorting through what to make of AI. But there's also kind of a bigger social question about, like, okay, what actually is technology? How much should we rely on that in society, or what is that? How does that even operate in society or different societies? And are there maybe some ways that we want to think about this he can help illustrate with different examples from his different cultures. So I'll leave it a little open-ended, see where you guys want to take that.
Sam, go for it.
Sam.
Sorry, I just had 4 sneezes in a row. You didn't hear them, but whew, man, my mind was blown by what you were saying. I guess it was coming out of my nose.
That's weird.
Yeah,
there's a dad joke for you.
Yeah, see, we're getting there. No, so I am interested because Tolkien hated industry. We know that for a fact. That's very obvious in what he portrayed Isengard as, with the Uruk-hai and Saruman cutting down trees, and just that was the obvious bad guy, was industry. And so I kind of look at technology as a form of industry in some ways, and especially the idea of AI, where it's creating something inorganic, if you will, uncreative. You can create a picture by asking it to. It's creative in the sense that you're giving it the prompts, but it's doing the work for you. And then obviously it doesn't look as good as somebody actually doing it, but it is now starting to kind of supplant the regular world, if you will, the real world, with this fake created world. And I mean, you see it. I had a conversation with one of my students that she had emailed me asking, like, I'd never met this person before, and I never get emails from students. They never email me. Like, it's only ever from parents. And so I got an email from a student, but I thought it was a parent because it said, like, hey, I'd love to know more about when you guys are meeting, about like your program and stuff like that. So I gave information. I said, yeah, your student can absolutely come. Your daughter can come at this point. And she goes, oh no, it's me. I'm the person. I was like, oh wow, well, I've never been approached in such a professional manner before. And then talking to her in person, she was like, yeah, I used ChatGPT to write that email. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And so just like those, I don't know, it's just like a fake world that it's a discerning world, I will say, that we live in now, where it's not that it's necessarily bad that she wrote that email in AI by any means, but at the same time, like, looking at what is being created now, like, I mean, I'm curious. Obviously Tolkien had very rigid ideas when it came to some of the stuff like that. How do you think industry in his mind, translates to technology and AI? Like, do you think he'd be just as opinionated about this, or you think you take it in a different way?
Well, I think Tolkien would certainly have opinions. Man was never short.
Yeah,
I think he would actually say that industry is a subset of technology, and he would have maybe a more nuanced view of industry than we might think at first blush. For example, the Sandymans already had a mill, which is an industrial technology, way before Saruman got there and made it the monstrous thing that it was.
Sure.
And there's a certain amount of development in pretty much every kingdom that speaks to some kind of level of industry, in even a agricultural technology, which he seems to be quite a fan. So I think there's an excess to industry that he really despises, an industry that consumes and defiles creation. That I think he genuinely despises. But there's a sort of human scale industry that he seems to favor and sort of set up in opposition as part of a well-ordered community. And I think he might kind of, well, I'll say, I was just having a conversation with a couple of friends about the Catholic Church and AI. They asked a different question. Could it be a vector for demons? And actually, there is an answer to that. But I think some of the same principles apply. Tolkien would probably start with, there's the circumstance, there's the sort of the created thing itself, and then the intention behind it. So if we look at the rings of power, these are, the One Ring is a device for enslaving the wills of others. And this intent is woven into the fabric of its design. That's what makes it evil. It is a suppressor of free will. So the other rings are susceptible to this, specifically the excluding the 3 elven rings, because those rings were made.
Right.
Like Sauron, if you like, has the software in them, so to speak. But the 3 elven rings are created not with that intention. So it's the same technology. They participate in the same, if you like, spiritual mechanics, which is why they fail. But their purpose is entirely different, which is why, absent the One Ring, they can be used for good, and the elves use them freely. So I think we can kind of look at AI, like these are large models meant to compute and utilize language, primarily. To what end? It seems to me that most of the people developing AI are trying to use them for mass media to influence other minds and even dominate them. And so, like, the analogy to the One Ring is pretty easy to make. But that's not to say that all AI models have to be designed that way. And there could be legitimate uses for them in terms of processing or storehousing vast information. But this, this sort of brings us to another thing. There does seem to be a really Tower of Babel idolatrous angle to AI. Like, we keep hearing people say that they're going to be gods, and I'm just like, we've got some of our metaphysics backwards here. But this desire to have a transcendence through the machine and godlike power, to what end? I mean, to supplant the old god, to make sure that he stays dead. Right? This presents all kinds of problems because of the intention that is being literally programmed into these models. That I think he would see as a major problem. And this is to actually bring this back to Tolkien explicitly, this is where he sort of makes the distinction between art and techne, or goitia, right? So he says basically there's no real distinction between technology and magic. It's a question of understanding. And magic exists for the domination of reality in one way or another, to conform it to the will of the user, and that's what makes it very, very dangerous. Art exists essentially for itself, because it is beautiful, or because it is good. And that kind of makes the difference between them, although they might result in very similar things and even use near identical methods. It's the intent and sort of the effect in the created order that distinguishes them.
So with that, I mean, a lot of the world is going to transition into AI. I think it's completely unavoidable at this point. I mean, people stopped having children. We're going to come close to population collapse in the next few generations if people don't start having children. So I think a lot of the industries are trying to get ahead of all of that potentially by creating AI and automating jobs that humans did in the past, just to try to keep society running. However, with that, it brings up exactly what you're describing, that this AI is built on language, and whoever is delivering the language and programming it and providing the algorithms for these AI overlords, as some would say, to learn from, really, they're going to be the ones at the forefront of manipulating thought and dictating kind of the course of the world that we end up in the next 15, 20 years.
Possibly. I just saw today that data centers are now 5% of the United States power grid requirements.
Jeez.
And at a certain point, I think, as much as people want AI, and it might be useful to distinguish between automation and AI, because I'm not entirely certain that these are the same thing necessarily. It's going to be, I guess there's really two things there that I'm bringing up. One, at a certain point, people are going to have to evaluate, can we afford the material cost of these data centers and these large language models. Power is one thing. The volume of water that these things consume is massive. And it is a question of, okay, how sustainable is that really if we're also going to have things like agriculture and feed people? So that at a certain point, these systems run into a question of, okay, is it actually cost effective to keep their lights on? But on the other hand, I think, yes, we are going to see a push for automation. But I think that's going to run into a hard limit too, because you can't get over having someone on the ground. We've seen that in war. When the war in Ukraine broke out, it was all about how drones have reshaped the battlefield, and I guess apparently drones really have made a difference. But at the same time, people are already advertising to complete normies like me that, oh, we have designed bots to shoot down drones. And so this is going to change the battlefield all over again, because you have to get a guy in there to take a position. And you can't get around that. And I think that's true for farming, right? If you pay attention to farmers, a lot of stuff is automated now, but then they have to go back and fix it because it breaks all the time, or nothing works because all the sensors are going off. And it actually takes longer to do something with automation than if it were just operating off of more mechanical processes. And then there's geopolitics. Like, are we going to have a continued supply of semiconductors? Is it going to be cost effective to ship semiconductors from where they're primarily manufactured, or to manufacture them in-house? There's a great deal of promise around AI, but a lot of it seems to be locked up in potential. And actualizing it is harder than some of its proponents seem to say that it is.
So I'm curious. I feel like it's kind of on topic, but maybe a little off from what we're talking about. But to kind of bring it back to Tolkien a little bit, but the idea of, we did a 4-part series on Aldarion and Rindis, and just his desire to utilize resources available for the sake of simply, I mean, there was obviously some political parts to play at that, his relationship with Gil-galad and stuff, and so obviously there's some reason for it. But I mean, honestly, it was a hobby. Like, he wanted to continue sailing, he wanted to explore, and at this point in our world, like, nothing's unexplored other than the sea at this point in space, pretty much. So maybe this isn't completely applicable, but I just kind of wonder, like, there's that tension as you read that story of, Rindis talking about it, like, oh, she loves these trees and you're just cutting them down. He's like, well, I'm planting another tree. It's fine. But you won't see that tree grow for, 40, 50, 60 years, like, depending on how fast they grow, and to the potential to become good wood for those ships again. So I don't know, maybe I'm rambling on a connection point here, but I'm curious, like, what stance would you think, or maybe, like, even just for you, like, where do you feel you sit at with that kind of comparison? For, if, like, do you agree with Aldarion's idea of, like, utilizing the resources to go and explore? I mean, you talked about, like, utilizing, the water that it costs and agricultural and stuff like that, but, like, where do you side on this, or where do you think Tolkien would side on this?
I think it's complicated, because on the one hand,
well, sure, of course.
Aldarion sort of sets the stage for Numenor's mass exploitation of northeastern Middle-earth, and this is represented by the vast deforestation of Eriador, which obviously Tolkien is not, thrilled about. And that has a real ecological impact. Like, it turns the old forest into a place that is hostile and cruel by the time the hobbits are crossing through it in Fellowship. Yeah. And we could make a comparison to this in a different way, with invasive species that are actually causing significant damage and hardening in an ecological system, and that's maybe not such a great thing behind actual navigation and exploration. But at the same time, because of Aldarion's exploration, when Numenor goes to pot, the faithful have a place to go. They actually have many places to go. Yeah. And so we set up causal changes. We set up causal chains, and it's really hard to see where they're going to go. Some of this is seems like it's definitely contributing to cultural rot. I mean, a great example would be AI on porn. It's just all over the place.
Yeah.
But technology in general is enabling this conversation. The algorithm is spreading this conversation across Twitter, right?
Good point.
So it becomes really, really complicated. And at a certain level, I think it comes down to, okay, what is it that's okay for a person to use? And what's his intention in using it?
Yeah, I think
and how much does he want to expose himself to?
Right.
I think that goes for most things in life, where the vast majority of things are relatively neutral. There's obviously a lot of black and white things, but when it comes to technologies or hobbies or anything, really, it's very neutral, and it's what you decide to do with it that can kind of dictate whether or not it's a positive or a negative on your life. And I mean, Twitter is or X is like probably the best example of that. You get the anonymous bots that sit around and troll all day and, you know, just harass people and make it a cesspool. However, you also get people that enjoy talking Tolkien, and it's like, oh, here's an entire community of people I wasn't exposed to before, and now we can have connection and discuss, you know, obscure topics like this one, which you never would have done, and analyze things in ways that, you know, we wouldn't have done prior. So like most things, I think what you're saying about Eldarion and Arendis, what Eldarion was doing was kind of gray, and what he chose to do with it was probably more on the negative side. However, like you said, it planted the seeds for an escape route, you know, a couple thousand years later.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't condone doing what Eldarion did. And not just in terms of the exploration, really. I'm thinking more about is that the exploration came at the cost of his family.
Yes.
Yes. Like, obviously we have a problem here. But very few of us are actually the noble scions of powerful houses with vast sums of wealth at our disposal. And not to be too sneaky about it, but what that essentially means is we get to profit from their disasters.
That's a good point.
That is a good point.
And I mean, to bring it all, I mean, back to what you mentioned in the very beginning of hope, even after Eldarion and everything that he did, even after Ar-Pharazôn and everything he did, you're good. I was thinking about Isildur, and I mean, just coming back to like having to bring, even though that species of tree wasn't ever in Middle Earth in that space, like how he was able to bring that tree.
Interesting.
But
sorry about that.
You're good. Welcome back. No, I was just thinking, like, to kind of bring the idea of hope back to the forefront with Isildur and how he saves the shoot of, you know, the tree of Nimloth in Numenor, and then he grafts it into Middle Earth, and eventually becomes the White Tree of Gondor, which is, you know, this one right here. And that is being a symbol of hope throughout the age of the Third Age, is kind of like that last final stand of hope. So there's that positive idea. There's the thought of, you know, you can take something that was here and take it and put it over here. But ultimately, I think Tolkien is what he's saying. I think there's a lot of symbolism in nature and just the hope that we can receive through these symbols. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling now, but I think, I mean, you look through how Eldarion even got the tree from Nimloth, like it was a gift from the elves, and like there's just so many kind of like ties and strings to this tree that even though the average person in Minas Tirith probably has no idea where that tree came from or who gave it to who, or how, you know, how it came to be, but they see that and they see hope. I was talking to one of my, like, I'm a mentor for one of the kids in the schools, and he wears a cross necklace, and he mentioned, you know, he's like, yeah, I don't understand why people who don't like understand religion wear religious things. It's like, yeah, totally. Like, you know, the cross is a complete torture device. Like, you don't see people wearing torture devices on their bodies ever. And he was, wait, what? I was like, yeah, you didn't know, like, Jesus, like, the cross, it was supposed to be the way for the Roman Empire to tell everybody, like, hey, don't mess with us, or else, like, this is what's going to happen to you. And now it's become a symbol of hope. And he's like, wait, I didn't know that, like, that was how it went down. I'm like, yes, that's how it went down. But yeah, it's a symbol of hope that people just, like, again, don't even know the roots of it, but they see it and they're like, oh, that's something I can look to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, we probably have about 15 minutes left or so, give or take. And I know that you really enjoy Frodo as a character. We've talked about him a couple of times through DMs and stuff. But what kind of character analysis would you give Frodo? Because I'll be honest, I never really liked him until I really dove into the books, because the way Peter Jackson portrays him is kind of just like a groveling, weak, I don't know, complaining, dragged on throughout the quest by Sam. Granted, Sam is one of the biggest heroes of the entire Legendarium, but he basically he can't do anything for himself, is the way Peter Jackson kind of portrays him. And so I never liked Frodo until I kind of dove into the books and realized he is more than that. So what do you think, if you're analyzing Frodo from the books, what kind of character is he actually?
Frodo is a priestly character. He is called with a particular mission, which is rooted in the divine will, which is ultimately a journey of sacrifice, and takes his life. And he's marked and set apart, sort of even before he receives the call. He's uniquely educated for a hobbit, uniquely in tune with creation, and the past. So he's sort of in some ways disposed to receive this call, but you look at sort of the key instances, he displays a level of spiritual mastery which is unusual for one of his stature. And in the imagery, especially, Tolkien is just really explicit about this. We see this in contrast with Gollum twice, in Emyn and at the slopes of Mount Doom. I mean, these very few times does Tolkien actually lift the veil between the seen and the unseen world to describe things as they're happening on a spiritual level, and they're almost always to do with Frodo. And I think he's kind of making a point. I mean, you can make a broader comparison that Tolkien gets squeamish about types, but he does use them. And Frodo is a priestly type of character. Gandalf is a prophetic type, and Aragorn is obviously a kingly type. And he's pulling from very old but outright medieval and scriptural imagery in all of these characters. It's insane. But Frodo in particular has this kind of unique lifestyle, which is life course, I should say, which is pretty modeled off of both an Old Testament priestly character, but also like a priestly character from the Middle Ages. He ends up celibate, completely destined for just this other purpose, which is bound up in a sacrifice that he makes that involves blood on a mountain, and which is accomplished ultimately not through his agency, but through the divine power, which is, it sets off all kinds of like theological bells about like how the priesthood operates in the Catholic Church. But in this other kind of way of sort of being set aside and associated with a redemptive sacrifice, as I've said, and also a mourning for sin. Mourning actually becomes, and pity becomes, a really big part of Frodo's character, not only sort of in a narrative function, like that's how the eucatastrophe comes about, right? He saves Gollum several times. But his interactions with Saruman throughout Return of the King, on the road from Isengard, and again at Saruman's death, we're kind of told repeatedly through other characters that Frodo is a spiritual powerhouse, even as he recedes more and more into the background with his immediate friends. Elrond says, "This task was chosen for you." Galadriel says, "I can't hide from you that I am a ring bearer because of your spiritual authority," in effect. And he's one of the very few people we know of who can actually glimpse her mind at all, which Sauron himself can't get into. And then lastly, Saruman recognizes, he says outright, "You have grown. Oh, how have you grown. I see your pity and I hate it in you." And even this role of being a merciful intercessor in the middle of a battle with the ruffians, like, no, he's trying to get the other hobbits from killing unarmed assailants because of how those ruffians have been acting. And this sort of social intercessor role of, yes, I understand the demands of justice, but mercy is good too. It's actually something we need. Is very much associated with the priesthood. And I think part of the reason that Frodo is the POV character for most of the book, and sort of the one who actually brings everyone's story together, is because that's sort of what the divine does in the daily life, but also for the individual person, right? This orientation in the legendarium of hope beyond, but sort of being touched by Eru's will, also relates to us in our lives. And like, this is actually the thing that is the most important. We might have governing responsibilities. We might need to bear witness to something and stimulate people to action. But if we don't have this fundamental orientation of sacrifice and mercy, something's gone very wrong. We've actually lost the narrative thread. We can't frame the story correctly. And I think that's why he was totally done dirty in the Jackson adaptation, because that's I would argue, a really important point of authentic masculinity, to use a sort of overused term.
Yes.
But that's one of the reasons that Tolkien actually lands, because he's got this correct orientation of, yeah, you need all three parts to be a good man, but if you don't have this one first, you're not going anywhere.
Sam, I'm curious what you have on that, because that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, what was going through my head while you're saying all this is man, I wish people who only watched the movies knew what you're just described. Like, my wife, she hates Frodo as a character, and one of the things we do is, I'll read Lord of the Rings to her and she'll fall asleep to it, and she always hates like the Frodo parts, and I'm like, honey, like, you don't understand, like, he's so different in the books than in the movies, and for all those reasons that you just described. And I think something that I've noticed too, I mean, the idea of that like priestly character effect, I mean, I wonder, the thing that really stands out to me is how much his failure weighed on him afterwards. Like, obviously his life led up to that point, and that was the climax, that was the pinnacle, and like his whole, training, if you will, this entire journey was led up to that point, and he failed. And then he's left with a physical mark of that failure in the loss of his finger, right? And so even though everyone's giving him props and dabbing him up for like, hey, good job destroying the ring, they see he's missing a finger and they want to know the story. And I can't imagine like the shame and the guilt that he feels in trying to share that. And that's the human side of him. I see, that's the human side of Frodo that, as you pointed out, like there is no one divine character outside of Eru, of course. But like, outside of like you looking at Gandalf and Aragorn and Frodo, like none of them are a messianic one for one, because they all have their own flaws. They all have their own insecurities. And for Frodo, he's got his big moral failure, if you will, at the very end of his story, which you could also attribute to, divine will in some respects. Like Tolkien says, nobody could resist the power of the ring. And so you can cut him a little bit of slack, but he didn't cut himself slack. Like, he was different after that point. And I mean, yeah, it looks like he got a thought in mind.
Well, Tolkien says, I don't consider this a moral failure, because I deliberately wrote Frodo to go to the point where you break.
Yeah.
And yes, that has to do with eucatastrophe. And and sort of the limitations of Frodo's character, because the failure is objectively true. Right? There's no escaping it. But both Aragorn and Legolas do not consider Frodo a failure, because he's gotten to this point beyond where he can actually continue to act as an agent, and his mind is warped, and his body is beaten to heck by the time he gets up there.
Sure.
And I think that's part. Like, yes, we get the nice literary dot on it where, okay, blood is being shed here. Like, this is a sacrifice. I want you to understand this. But most of the sacrifice is a sacrifice of spirit and body. And in some sense, it's a sacrifice of moral perfection. And this actually ties back to hope as well. Like, ultimately, you are not the causal agent of your moral perfection. God's life in you is the causal agent of moral perfection. Now, you need to cooperate with that. Otherwise, you're not going to get much of anywhere. But ultimately, that's still not you. It's how much you are animated by the divine will. And I think that in some ways, it's kind of important for Frodo to fail. Sort of, if you like, metaphysically necessary. Because the point of this hero is not that he succeeds, it's that he goes to the point where he can give no more, and that ends up being enough. That's the limit of his agency.
To tie back to scripture, it's that idea of that Paul brings up of a living sacrifice, like offer your body as a living sacrifice.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's a awesome way of describing Frodo, because just like Sam said, if people actually had read that as opposed to seeing what we saw on screen with Peter Jackson, I think Frodo would be a character that people respect a lot more, as opposed to like Sam's wife Ariel just wanting to skip through, which I definitely understand. But as you were talking about that, it kind of dawned on me that Frodo, yes, he was kind of divinely put into this place, but he was also given the tools from a very young age to have that moral reference frame and like that pity built into him in a sense, because he
started with Bilbo.
He knows Bilbo's story. Bilbo spared Gollum initially, and then there's also Gandalf, who was under the tutelage of Nienna, and from her learned pity, and they were incredibly close. And Gandalf even kind of chastises Frodo at one point when Frodo says that he wishes Bilbo had killed Smeagol, and Gandalf actually kind of chastises him in a way. And so even though he was this character that was meant to be in the position that he is in, he still had to have the help from others to help guide that moral compass to grow and develop and ultimately become what it was.
Tolkien very rarely repeats whole sections of his own writing. One of the instances that he does it is in Emyn when Frodo flashes back to his conversation with Gandalf, and most of that conversation is represented all over again, just so you can get the point that pity is really important for its own sake, and mercy, and that this sort of that is really the foundation of Frodo's spiritual authority. Yes, he's a ring bearer, and he's built up by that point in Emyn a real sort of acuity with the ring. He's aware of how it operates. It's been weighing on him for a very long time. Which just say that temptation is a kind of teacher. But it's really his choice, in a sense, to wield the ring against its own purpose. No, he doesn't put it on, but he's bearing it, and he's in some way in accord with it. This is very clear from a figure in white with a wheel of fire at its breast. And he says, all right, if you're going to evoke an oath, Gollum, you can't do it on this device. It will destroy you. Or you can't do it by this device, but you can do it on it. It's a recognition that Gollum is writing his will into the fabric of reality, and he's doing it on a device that dominates other wills. Frodo's like, all right, fine, I'm going to witness this. This is going to hold you to it. But I choose to accept it as the one who is the ring bearer. It's a level of like genuine authority that very few people else in the novel actually have.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting, because you don't really think of Frodo as like an authoritative figure. I mean, he is the ring bearer, but it's, I don't know. You kind of think of like if Boromir had the ring, he would have been an authoritative figure, right? You don't really think of Frodo in that same light. But aside from, I mean, I can think of a few times that Gandalf displays that and a few times that Aragorn displays that. Aside from those, I don't know if there's any other characters that really portray the same amount of authority in the ways that you're describing. Whereas, you know, when they're coming up on the Argonath and Aragorn stands up and he's like, fear not, you know, to everybody, and he like grows in their mind and everything. That's a very authoritative way of describing that scene. Or Gandalf with the Balrog saying like, you cannot pass. And most of the other leadership characters just don't have that same authority to back what they're saying, even though they're in a place of authority. It just doesn't hit the same as those three characters, which makes me think kind of what you're describing with the what'd you say, the priest, the prophet, and the king. I wonder if that's intentional and how Tolkien did that.
I think it is. I mean, you can go into even like a quick look at Aragorn. Like, he's borrowing a ton of messianic parallels from Christ in Scripture. Right? We have the scion of a noble house, of a royal house, long bereft of a throne, raised in an isolated and conquered northern kingdom from a people who crossed a sea in the middle of disaster to attain freedom, who have always been called out unique among other men. Like, just the parallels with Israel are nuts. And the house of David coming back to claim his throne in the southern kingdom of a fractured, once united set of kingdoms. But too, Tolkien understands the distinction between raw power and authority. That's a huge part of why certain people can do the things that they do. Like, Aragorn is the one who actually has the authority over the Palantir, and this is why he can challenge Sauron for their use. Yes, he has a lot of raw power because of his lineage and who he is as a person. But it's ultimately his authority. It's his right to use those stones because they're intended for his house that gives him the edge over Sauron, which is not something that Denethor has because he's only holding that authority in trust. Even though his raw power level is very similar to Aragorn's.
So our first guest we ever had on the podcast, Michael Jahowski, he actually wrote a book called The Good News of the Return of the King, the Gospel in the Middle Earth, and he brought up a lot of the same points that you just did of Aragorn being that king factor, and that kind of triune identity. And it is interesting to put Frodo in that authoritative state alongside them. And I think maybe, forgive me, I don't remember if this happens in the books, but that scene in the movie where Aragorn looks at Frodo and is like, hey, you bow to no one, and everyone bows in front of like all the hobbits and stuff. Like, that's, if nothing else, a really, really great tribute by PJ, you know, outside of everything else, all the mistakes he made outside of everything else. Like, I think that's to tie in all those moments. Like, that's a really cool moment, like with all this in mind, as everybody's just bowing down to the hobbits and what they did, but also understanding on a deeper level that idea of the sacrifice they went through.
There is a very similar moment on the field of Cormellan after the battle at the Black Gate. And Tolkien, in some ways, focuses it far more on Frodo uniquely. Merry is back in Minas Tirith, and Pippin is present, and Sam is present. They're sort of both there as a knight and a servant. But Frodo is given much more particular pride of place as the ring bearer, sort of according to his office. And we see something very similar this trilogy of the priest, prophet, and king is really brought out in Aragorn's coronation, where yes, Aragorn's taking over the governance, and there's a ton of symbolism, but if you look at who is assisting him to assume the symbols of his office, Frodo and Gandalf have pride of place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's neat.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think we're right up on about an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes here, and I got to get to bed because I know my son will be waking us up in about an hour and a half screaming. So we're kind of going through it at the moment. But Benjamin, I just want to say thanks for coming on. This is one of the first true like interviews that we've done that's not like topic related. I mean, like Sam mentioned, we interviewed Michael about his book, and then we had Mixer on at one point about his article on the Blaze. But thanks for bearing with us as we kind of go through learning how to do it with just a guest and trying to pick their brain. And thank you for being a willing participant of that, and thank you for sharing so much deep insight. I know I mentioned this earlier, but I love the way your brain works, and it really strikes a chord with me, and that I don't even think as deeply about this stuff as I want to. And it helps tie in a lot of the scripture and stuff that it helps me bring it all together full circle. So I just want to say thank you to you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, both of you. It's been a wonderful time.
Yeah, it's always fun. I think about this sometimes when I'm rereading Lord of the Rings or prepping for a podcast or something, and I'm like, man, I'm such a nerd. And it's just like, this is such a niche community of people, but the lessons are endless. And that's the thing that I kind of hold on to, is like, even sometimes my wife will make fun of me for just how much time I spend, studying Tolkien or reading him, or, all the things, watching the movies or whatever. But again, it's more than just a hobby for me. And it sounds like it's definitely kind of helped shape your worldview a little bit as well. And
just a little.
Same. Yeah, maybe just a little bit. But I think, just to encourage you, man, I don't know if you feel the same way of like, I've got all this useless knowledge of Tolkien that nobody really wants to hear, but at the same time, like you're sharing that on a daily basis, whether they know it or not. And I think in the same spirit of Tolkien, of that, we're not preaching Tolkien in the sense, but we're using a lot of the principles and weideas and thoughts that, he even used from scripture and other wonderful, mythologies and stuff that people don't even realize, when we're conversing with them, when we're having conversation, the way that we interact in relationships and stuff. And I always tell people, I had a conversation with someone recently, and they're like, wait, you've had a Tolkien podcast for like 3 years? I'm like, yeah, there's endless like stuff you can talk about in it. There's countless lessons you can learn. Like, what? Like, no, you got to be like running out of content. I'm like, no, not even scratch the surface. And people have no idea, again, just how influential that he's been in my life, and how that's even influenced the way that I relate to them. And so just some encouragement for you, man. Like, I think your students are definitely benefiting from your hours of learning and study of Tolkien and Lewis, and whoever else that you're diving into as well. But it's definitely got a positive impact, and I don't think they even know it, and that's okay. That's cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I will go ahead and light the beacon and call for aid. This is part of the podcast where we as Gondor breaking the halls of Medicel and shout, Gondor calls for aid. Will you, Rohan, answer? So if you enjoyed the podcast, please light a beacon by sharing it with fellow friends and fans. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a review. We're also on YouTube as well. If you'd like to share your Tolkien story, you can either email us at wekpodcast@gmail.com or shoot us a message on any of our social media platforms. Or, we'll just maybe have you on the podcast to share it like we did with Benjamin here. It was a really fun time. So Benjamin, any last thoughts of like where people can find you? Any like, your Twitter handle, anything that you want to share about you yourself that people might want to know?
Oh, well, if people want to see a nerd, be on Twitter. I'm at Golden Aspen 1492. I occasionally publish things on Substack at Post Provincial, and I'm around.
You're around. I love that. That's great. Well, again, a huge thanks to Ben for being on the podcast this week and giving us just a wonderful, thought-provoking conversation. We don't really know what to expect for our next podcast. Again, it could be another conversation with one of you all, or it could be a deep dive into a different part of the Legendarium. We'll decide as the days come. But thank you again for joining us for some well-earned comforts. And until next time, we bid you a very fond farewell.